Hello and welcome. This is an adaptation of a Photoshop tutorial I saw where they were trying to make an image into sort of a pastel type image. I freely admit it's not probably truly pastel, but it has that sort of feel about it. And you can even add a black and white adjustment and make it into a black and white image. Now I did this and then I was sort of at a loss with what to do with this image and how I could use it. So what I did was I made an image like this, and I used the pastel part up here in the corner and put another version, the proper version of the image here, and just sort of made a sort of composite type image out of this. Now I then tried this on a different image where it was this one here, where you got darker skin, darker clothes, darker hair, and it didn't work as well, the pastel part of it. Still, it's not too bad, but it does work better, I freely admit, on lighter hair, skin and clothes and what have you than it does on darker. But you could probably tinker with a lot of the settings. I've tinkered a bit with the settings from this image to the last image to get to this. So it will not necessarily work on all images, but I will do this tutorial twice, once with this image and then once with this image, and then you can see sort of where I've altered things and where you may want to alter things yourself. So I will just reset things and I'll be back in a while. Okay, I'm going to start on this image first of all. This image and this image here, I've got both of these from Pixabay.com, but you can use your own. It's probably best to have an image where there is not so much background. Makes it easier to sort of lose the background, as we'll see a bit later with this picture here, because I had to sort of adapt and extend this part of the background, but that's for the sort of second half of this tutorial. So once you have your image, the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate it. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I just do it because I like to keep the original safe at the bottom, even though it's not necessarily going to be used. So you have your new duplicated layer, and what I'm going to do to that is add a threshold adjustment. And you got the adjustment icon down here. You can click on that and come up to threshold, and that will add the layer above the image, and it's also got a layer mask. So what we're going to do is move the slider of the threshold to the right, and it will slowly bring back parts of that image, and you can put it to whatever point you want. I'll leave it there for now. What I am going to do is change the blend mode of this, which is down here, and I'm going to change this to add. So that's going to give us just a hint of colour coming through. You can see her blue eyes are there and a bit of the skin is there. And I'm also going to lower the opacity of this down to 50%. There we go. So we've got even more of that colour showing through. So now it's just a case of moving this slider of the threshold. The higher you go, you get more of the image back to where it was, and the lower you go, it will just become a faded image. So it's finding that point that you like that image to look a bit sort of pastel like. Now I liked it around the 65-66 mark, if I remember correctly. It's a bit, let's come down to the 50s. Yeah, 50%. So I've got the opacity on 50%. I've got the blend mode on add, and I have the threshold slider on 50%. So I can now close that, and I can right click this image here, layer I should say, and come down to merge visible, and that will make a single flattened layer of all the images or layers that are below it. I mean, I could turn all these ones off, it will have no effect because this is a flattened version of all those layers below it. So now we have this pastel type image. This is where we sort of extend what we can do with it. So I'm going to start a new project. So come up to new, and I'm going to make the size of this 2500 pixels by 2000 pixels. I mean, you can do it whatever size you want to work with, and I'm going to increase the DPI up to 300, but you may want to keep it lower. If you're just going to be putting it on the web, for example, you may want it a lower DPI. And I think I'll remove the transparent background, so I've got to get a white background. I've got to type photo, but you could do print or what have you. So we have the new image there. So coming back to this sort of pastel type image, one thing I did forget to do to this is you could, if you want, add the black and white adjustment if you prefer it to look black and white. So let me just do that quickly. So you could then sort of tinker with those settings and get a different sort of image, but I'm going to stick with the color version for now. So I'm going to right click that flattened layer, come down to copy, come to my new project, and then edit and paste. Now this is obviously quite bigger than the background, so what I'm going to do is I've zoomed out, I'm going to come to the move tool, and I'm going to move it so I get the green line vertically and the red line horizontally, because I have snapping on. So now I know that that is centered, and then I'll come up to the one of the corners, hold down the control key, which will keep it resizing from the center point. So it's just a case of coming down to a size that you like, and then press Control and 0 to zoom out. And then it's just a case of resizing and repositioning where you want that to go. Maybe just make that a tad bigger. Yeah, that's not too bad. See, again, even at this point you could add a black and white filter and come up to black and white, and then before you make any alterations, click and drag this down and into a child, make it a child layer of this pixel layer, image layer. And to do that, this blue line will come just over to the edge of that icon. If you come down too far, it will be sort of below, and you want to make it a child of, so it is only affecting that image. So you could then sort of make your alterations now, or you could have done it before. So I will leave it like that, and then if you find that you don't like it black and white, you can always turn it off. So next thing we want to do is to add a layer mask to this sort of mini group. And to do that, you just click on this icon here, and that will add a layer mask to this group here. And then we come to the paintbrush tool, select our brush, which I'm going to go for a basic round brush, and I'm going to have the opacity start around the 40% mark. Hardness is going to be 0. What have I done now? Somehow I've moved them around. Where was I? Hardness 0, opacity 40%, and the color is going to be black because this is a white layer mask. Let me increase the brush size. Basically what I'm going to do is just paint around the edge just to lose that very hard edge, so which made you know that it was an image to start with, and just sort of blend it into the background. I mean, you can increase, if you want to do this a bit quicker, you could increase the opacity. Alright, that will do, I think, on there. So I'm happy with that, and what I'm going to do now is highlight the whole layer again, and I'm going to duplicate that and change its blend mode to screen, and I'm just going to lower the opacity slightly just to sort of bring back that slight hint of, make it slightly darker but not as dark. So again, if you wanted the colour back, you would have to turn off the black and white from both of those groups, and then you'd have your colour version. But I'm going to stick with the black and white for now. So what we can do now is highlight both of those and group them together. And you don't have to do this, but I'm going to rename this Pastel, so we know that that is that image. If I want to resize or move it around, I can, and they will all move and resize together. So now it's just a case of getting the other image in here, which is this one. Now what we want here is the original, so I've got the original at the bottom here, which I've turned off, but I can turn that back on. So I can right click that layer, copy it, come back to our project, and then edit and paste. So again, like before, I'll come to the move tool, center it, hold down the control key when I alter its size till I'm about rightness, control 0 to zoom out, and what I want to do is face it the opposite direction, so I'm going to come up to arrange and flip horizontally. So now she's looking the other way, and then I will add a layer mask to that image. So again, come back to the paintbrush tool. Again, we're on black, 0 hardness, 40%, and like we did up here, we're going to get rid of these sharp lines and just sort of help fade her into the background a bit. again how much you want to fade into the background is a personal taste thing. Let's leave it at about there, and then it was just a case of adding some text. So I'll come to the artistic text tool and I'll just put that about there, and we'll just call it Miss Beauty, and I'll highlight all of that, and then find a text that you like the look of. And if I remember rightly, the one I used was this one here, which is Barata. I can increase the size a bit, goes 96, maybe center it like that, and then that would be that image finished. So I'll now sort of again reset things and just work on the other image with the darker skin, darker clothes and what have you, and we'll see what differences I may have to make to get a similar sort of image. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, to start work on this second part of the tutorial, using this image with someone with a darker skin, darker clothes, darker hair, what have you, and a slightly busier background. The first thing I'm going to do is, like, it's pretty much the same to start with. I'm going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to add the threshold to the first layer. So adjustments, threshold. Now as you can see, because there was some quite dark areas there to start with, I've not even had to alter that slider before some of the darker areas are already starting to show through. Now where I altered the blend mode to add before, I'm going to change this one to overlay, which I found to work better. I mean, add is, yeah, see, add didn't really show through like it did before, so I'm going to go with overlay, and the opacity I'm not going to go down quite so far. Let's try around these 64, 65%, and then bring up the threshold slider. Again, I don't need to go as high, probably somewhere around the 35 to 40 range. So again, I can still tinker with the blend modes. You can find one that works best with each individual image. I mean, that one there, hard light, is not too bad actually. Let me just tone it down slightly, maybe alter the opacity. No, that's not too bad. It's a bit more pastel than my first practice run at this. So I'm going to stick with the hard light blend mode. I've got the threshold on 34 and the opacity on 35. Let me just close that down. Now, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to crop this, because I don't necessarily want all this part down the bottom here. So let me just get the crop tool and upping it up to about there. Let me just bring that in a bit as well. In fact, I can come in further because I'm going to be trying to delete a lot of this anyway in a minute. So I will go with that image, and like before, I will right click this and come down to merge visible, So I now have a flattened, merged image that is that size, because if I turn all these off, as you can see, it is a flattened image on that size. So I now need to start the new project again. So it's new. I'm going to keep the same size, 2500 by 2000, and click OK. And then I'm going to copy this merged layer and paste that in, and then I'm just going to resize this to the size I want it. So let me just hold down the Control key, and I think this time I'll put it over here using that corner, so I don't have to mask any of that off. But I do want to add a layer mask to this image. Come to the paintbrush tool, it'll be on black. Again, I'm going to go with 40% opacity, hardness of 0, and we are painting on the mask, not the image. And like before, we are getting rid of mainly that hard edge, but also in this particular image, trying to get rid of some of that, if not all of that background that is starting to show through, which does mean I might be affecting the hat and maybe the skin areas that are close to, but it's a choice thing whether you want to, how much you want to get rid of this background. If you reduce the size of the brush and maybe the hardness, you can not affect the actual image so much. But I'm doing this fairly quickly to try and just show you. Right, that's about as close as I want to get with that, especially the speed that I'm trying to do this at. Right. Right, so I'll leave that like that for this particular image. So, like before, what I'll do is, just shut that down, I will highlight this little group here, and I will duplicate it and change the blend mode to screen, and I'll just lower that down. Probably hardly even noticeable. Let's go around the 30% mark. Yeah, so that's not too bad. So now I just need the full image. Well, before I do that though, let me just put these into a group. So I'll highlight both of those layers and group them together, so they are now able to be resized or whatever, you moved if I need to, but I don't think I will, but they are now grouped together. Now I don't think I can use the full image like I did in the last image because I cropped it, so let me shut that down and then open the full image again, and then I will just copy that and then paste it into this image, and then unlike before, I'm going to flip it, but obviously the roles are reversed this time because the main image will be on the left, whereas before it was on the right. So just come up to arrange and flip horizontally, and I won't even really need to crop this because it sort of fits pretty much where I want it to, so I'm going to leave that like that. But then we do have this problem here of this part of the white background, which is obviously not blending in to this background here. So the workaround I've got for this is, first of all, I'm going to hide that layer there, and then I'm going to extend this background over. And to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up to the rectangle marquee tool, and I'm just going to select a sliver. I mean, you can make this as big as you can dare. I would imagine, depending on your particular image. I'm going to go for about there and press Control and J, and what that will do is make a duplicate of just that sliver. So I'll press Control and D to lose the selection, and then come to the Move tool, and I'm just going to move this sliver over. I want it just to overlap a little bit, not a vast amount. So I had that, and then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and drag out, and this will make another copy of that sliver. And once you have it start moving, you can let go of the Alt key, and again just overlap that. And now if I press Control and J, it should power copy the next lot of slivers. So I've got about 5 or 6 there. So what I'm going to do now is, the top one is highlighted. I'll hold down the Shift key and click on the bottom of those slivers of the background, right click and group them together, and then I'm just going to add some Gaussian blur. So filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and as you can see, this is at 100%. That has pretty much lost the joins. I mean, you could always bring back a little bit if you wanted, depending on how well you want this to blend. And then click apply. Now you could also merge the visible layers, so you have this single flattened version of both the background and the slivers, and you could clone out that line. Let's try it with the in painting brush first of all. See how good a job that does. That's not too bad. Yeah, so now we have a sort of fairly well blended background. I can now unhide this group down the bottom and just click and drag it to the top. And then if you still feel that there's some of this background is showing a bit too much, because I think that is, I can now add a layer mask to that group. Again, come back to the brush tool. I'm on black, I'm still on 0 hardness. Let's increase that hardness a bit. And opacity, I'll just maybe lower that a tad. And just bring in a smaller brush and try and lose some of that white that is just showing in and around that image. Again, I'm not being as precise as I probably could be, just for the sake of speeding up this video. Right, so that is okay for this. And then, like before, just if you wanted, add a bit of text. And let's go with what was the recent one. And that is that finished. Like I said, it's probably not as good, the sort of pastel type of it, part of it, on portraits where you have darker areas, be it skin, clothes or hair or what have you, than it did with the fairer image. So that's the end of the tutorial. Hopefully it was of some use to somebody. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.